Well, have they tested
We should go and
positive?
visit.
Or are they just, they're
They were-
monitoring?
They were with somebody that tested positive, so now they're quarantined.
Okay, so they're not confirmed,
They're not confirmed.
but they were with someone.
They were with someone.
All right.
DNA.
So here's the deal. We'll actually even include it in the slides because we might put it on the final. Who knows? Probably not. All right. So I am supposed to leave Saturday morning to fly to Fort Lauderdale to go on a 1-week cruise that leaves Sunday. Now, we have the concerns regarding the coronavirus on multiple levels, right? One level is catching the virus itself. Another level is bringing the virus back and potentially infecting others. Third level is even if you go on the ship, don't get the virus yourself, don't bring it back, the ship could get quarantined and you might not make it back. You know, the 1-week cruise turns into a 6-month cruise or something like that, or a 21-day cruise. So that's the conflicting things here. But now let's throw out the reality. Things are probably going to get worse before they get better, right? From a spread perspective across the country. Forget about cruises. This is like the worst time of year for this to happen relative to colleges because everybody's about to go out on spring break. So the students are going to go off all over the place and bring the coronavirus back. Not their fault, right? This is just the nature of, the spread of something like that. So if I'm going somewhere and bringing it back, I'm really no worse than any other student that's going somewhere and bringing something back. And then on the other thing is, like you were mentioning, like with Cardinal Stretch, I don't think they've done this yet, but I think it's just a matter of time. If I'm predicting, I bet you post spring break, all of our classes will become online classes. I don't think we'll meet in person after spring break. That would be my guess. Other universities have already done it. Stanford's done it, things like that. At our faculty meeting yesterday, they talked about that as a contingency plan, in case we effectively have a spread of the virus here. So with that in mind, if I'm going to effectively be likely teaching online anyways, where it doesn't matter if I'm quarantined on some military base or something like that, because I'll have my laptop with me.
How good will the Wi-Fi be though?
Well, I could just use this as soon as I get to land. I'll be able to use this. Otherwise, I'll be on the Wi-Fi of my of the cruise ship, and then who knows. But worst case, you can record lectures and then upload at a trickle rate overnight until it finally makes it up or something like that. Yeah. So that's so let's a little bit more background. So we've seen all the news and stuff like that about the cruise ships being quarantined and things like that. Well, we're going to be on the Regal Princess. And that particular ship, when it came in from its last sailing on Sunday morning, had a crew member that was suspected of having coronavirus. So they kept it offshore while they ran the test. Apparently they didn't have it. But the ship itself then got into dock very late, and they canceled the next cruise. So that ship's not sailing this week, so they're, I assume, going to do some sort of crazy deep cleaning or something like that on the ship. But then, so the next cruise on that ship would be our cruise. But they let all those people off the cruise like late in the day and gave them like vouchers to go stay at hotels because most of them had already missed their flights. And then hotels started turning them away because they were carriers now. Not really carriers, probably, maybe, who knows. But the hotels are no longer letting them stay there because they're like, basically coming from a leper colony. To keep this biblical. So if you're me, what do you do? Here's the perks and trade-offs. This is the final part of this. I'm allowed to cancel now and get a refund in the form of a voucher for a future cruise, which we already have more booked, so that's fine. We'll just put it towards that. Or if I keep my reservation, they'll give us like an onboard credit to use on this cruise of like $200. But if I hold out and let the cruise line potentially cancel the cruise, then I get a refund plus a voucher for a future cruise.
How long do you have to cancel?
You have, I think, 48 hours before the cruise goes.
Before you fly.
Before I fly, yeah.
Right before you fly.
So I think we have until like 10 a.m. on Thursday or something like that to cancel on our own if they don't cancel on us. I think once Thursday rolls around, we're locked in from our perspective. But then we're just going to see if the cruise line cancels. What do you think?
I think we need a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Laying out the pros and cons.
We need to make a link list.
What's the gut feeling?
I'd go for it.
You go for it?
YOLO. Are you confident you can beat the flu? Like,
Oh,
just a normal
yeah.
flu?
My wife and I, neither of us are concerned that, or overly concerned that we would succumb to the virus ourselves. Even if we caught it, we'd probably get over it. We're, probably not in the strong of an age group as like you would be,
Yeah.
but I think we're relatively safe.
And are you-
No greater chance of dying from it than getting the normal flu.
Okay, cool. But then are you in any direct contact with a bunch of old people?
Oh, absolutely, on a cruise ship.
But like here. Like, do you,
Oh, yeah. So the big concern there would be two things. So church and then Dr. Locklear. Recorded 6:30. But yeah, definitely. Like going to church, maybe we would self-quarantine when we came back and not go to church for a couple of weeks to possibly, get somebody infected at church. But the idea being, I think that the problem's bigger than like me. I think you're gonna have a whole bunch of people coming back post spring break that are gonna just infect the world.
I see the real issue here being your conscience, because you don't want to get other people sick, right?
Correct.
You're not worried about yourself.
Correct.
So I think the best solution is to go on the cruise, and if they cancel it, great, because then you get all the extra money and everything.
Yeah.
But then just self-quarantine yourself when you get home for an extra week, because then you'll know if you got sick from the cruise, because it takes 2 weeks.
So I get the best of both worlds. I get the cruise or the extra perks.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of an abundance of caution, self-quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yep. And then you can,
Whether I have it or not.
and then you can teach classes from home, even if they're not
that just blew my mind.
online.
Question.
How is there one?
Yeah.
I think at this point it's already out there in the world. So you going on this cruise, potentially bringing it back, isn't really gonna have an effect on anything. So I think you should go.
But what if everybody thought that way? What if everybody said, oh yeah, I'm going to go and catch it and bring it back because I won't be the first one to bring it back?
But I feel like it's gonna happen regardless.
Well, I think that's the case too.
The
But it's
question
more of an
is like,
ethical concern.
is it such a bad thing if they bring it back if we get to miss school?
We're not gonna miss school.
Yeah, you won't miss school. Classes
They
won't be
wouldn't- they-
canceled.
Like we had like a serious outbreak here with the coronavirus. You don't think they would cancel classes for like a week?
Online.
No, I mean, they might cancel it for like a day or two while we transition to an online thing.
Or,
Yeah, but I think
no,
that,
but they would like make it so like you would do it online, but you wouldn't actually have to go to class. Like you would like.
yeah, the idea is all the students would be quarantined.
Yeah. But just the students who are affected, and then everyone else who's healthy would go. Or
No, I think that what they would end up doing is just saying everybody's going to be quarantined, and we'll just do classes online, with an effort of not spreading the infection more.
I mean, honestly, if we all get to kind of hang out in our rooms and go to class and do that, so it might not be bad.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, regardless of my decision, I actually believe that's likely to happen.
Right, and that's what I think. I think that's going to happen.
Because it's already happened at other universities. Like Stanford's done it already out of, they're out in California where there's already more cases. But
Right, and that's the thing, is that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
well, right.
That was impressive.
Yeah, so I don't think that my decision has any bearing on that. I think that's going to happen anyways.
We have so many, well, I should say, we have students that are going to go on spring break who probably thought the same thing, but are going to say YOLO and just go. So like,
Well, most students are probably going to do that because you're in
Right. So
the
they're
perfect
gonna-
age group where you're really at very low risk of having long-term issues.
but if you're
From
not
it.
worried about it harming you in any way, and it's going to happen regardless, feel like.
See, I'm kind of thinking like you get an extra long cruise,
Right.
or like your trip is
You
longer.
teach on your cruise for the rest of the semester.
Well, plus you have like this like story, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, okay, you get off the cruise 3 days late. Now you're quarantined for 2 weeks in some military base, and then it becomes, like the vacation story, Corona 2020. Go ahead in the back.
So will this be just for the CS department or for all classes?
Well, no, I mean, I think this would be. Keep it. First of all, nothing's been announced at the university. I'm just speculating, but it would not be a CS department decision. It would be a Concordia decision. I don't think the CS department would say we're not going to have face-to-face classes. It would be a university mandated thing, which very possibly might not happen. It was discussed at the faculty meeting yesterday as a possibility, and other schools have already been doing it, so who knows?
Well, this is, keep in mind that Wisconsin's been one of the lucky ones, quote unquote lucky ones.
Well, right now.
Right now, but like we've only had 2 cases, or I think 2 confirmed cases.
Right, so how many cases will we have tomorrow?
That is
And
true.
the day after that, and a week from now?
I feel like a lot of this is also, like, not to get too opinionated, but I feel like this is being, not to downplay this, because people dying is horrible, but I think it's being very much overblown.
Could be.
And very much mass panic.
Yeah, it could be, and that's where you have to fast forward and look. Hindsight's always 2020.
Right.
We might
Of
fast
course,
forward
I
6
think
months and look
now,
back
I'm
and
not
say it
saying
wasn't a
you
big
should
deal.
completely take out funding for like preventive measures. No. Do everything possible. I'm just saying that like with these preventive measures in mind, I feel like the fear of the coronavirus is kind of less into things with that in mind.
For certain groups.
For certain groups, yeah. Well,
Yeah, I think that's
for most
the-
people, it's very no. For
That's the
overall-
danger right now with spring break about to happen,
That's fair.
where you have a whole bunch of 20-somethings traveling the world. Yeah.
Very important question. Would your unlimited drinks transfer over to the military?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Big deciding
It's a business deciding factor.
So wait, what are you gonna do if they don't? Are you just gonna move to? Are you gonna go to your own quarantine?
Yeah.
So even if they do like the all online classes, there's nothing that they can do to stop us from like getting together like in study groups and stuff still, right?
I don't think the university could do that. I mean, I think there could be
Police.
there's some sort of like.
Don't, but
Well, no, I think there's a level of forced quarantine that's at the legal level where like the police or somebody can tell you you're not allowed to go out. And if you do, there's like a penalty or like a fine, kind of like a curfew. When you have a curfew or somebody breaks curfew, they can get fined or shot.
So they just give you. When does this happen in the United States?
It's like the contagion monkey.
When does this happen in the United
tell me
States? Please tell me.
we're all doing a programming assignment and some dude just walks in and shoots.
Well, only if you're doing it in a public area, not in the private area. Yeah, I mean, I think there's all sorts of levels of stuff that could happen. I mean, I think realistically, what'll end up happening is, like Italy, just like quarantine the country.
Yikes.
Like the whole country is quarantined in Italy.
In Italy's situation, kind of makes sense.
Well, yeah. So I mean, then what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you acted more conservatively than you maybe needed to, but in 3 weeks, anybody who was going to die from it will have died, and then everybody else would have gotten over it, and now people can come back outside and hopefully not spread more infection. Or it turns out to be a thing where it was massively overblown and people just worked from home for 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
We also remember that once this is over, if this ever becomes over, that everyone should turn their attention to the ones that started this all, and that's China and their idiotic policies.
Well, we don't know.
Actually,
We don't know how that
about
even started.
How about starting with actually releasing accurate statistics instead of trying to cover their own butts?
Well, that's not going to happen from any country.
I know, but
This has nothing to do with China.
Be way more honest. They actually could have stopped this. They could have possibly stopped this pandemic way earlier than they could have.
We would probably be singing a different tune if we were the source.
No, I think we would have had this done by now.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
True.
I think it's easy to be on the other side and point fingers.
Well, no, China was just bad in
I don't know if that's necessarily true either. I think any sort of economic strength world is always going to think through the eyes of capitalism and money and things like that and decide, is what's the right thing? Do you cause a panic? I mean, in hindsight, we can clearly look back and say that maybe they shouldn't have squelched the original whistleblower who was trying to warn people about this. Well, in hindsight, that's clear. That shouldn't have happened. But at the time, you don't want somebody running outside screaming the sky is falling. So at the time, they might have made the decision that any country would have made.
Chicken Little scenario.
One final comment.
Yeah.
It's Clancy's fault.
That is hard.
So what's the final verdict? Do I go or not go?
I say you go and
I
then
say
you
you go.
self-quarantine.
I say
Then you
go.
get the best of both
Really
worlds.
thinking about it, like, it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. However, asterisk, I think that it is being a little bit, like, it's, because there's just no immunity at all, that's the big worry, is that everyone is potentially,
At risk.
capable of getting it. But once again, the people at risk aren't in our age demographic. So even if you did potentially bring it back here, no one here would be facing, or at least would most likely not be facing any sort of serious threat other than a flu. And
Especially with self-quarantining.
right.
Then I wouldn't be adding to the problem.
Yeah.
I had-
Then you can ethically
Say I went on vacation and then came back and extended my vacation by, I didn't have to wear pants for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So
The same thing
I see
happened
this as an
100
absolute
years
win.
ago with the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
It's like a third of the world got it. Millions, like tens of millions of people died. That was 100 years ago. It's like the same thing happening today.
well, we could say it's the same thing, but you do have, 100 years ago, somebody from China getting to the United States wouldn't be something that could happen in a 10-hour, 12-hour flight. Right now, it can. So it's it's a different world. So I mean, we almost have to, they would have been quarantined on the boat for, 3 weeks as they were crossing the ocean.
In 100 years ago, we still used coats, right?
Oh,
So that
well,
was-
still,
that was-
now they're for enjoyment, right?
Well, yeah.
Or shipping heavy containers.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting. But I like your take on it. You can go, and all this is encompassed under the thing is I actually believe the cruise line's going to end up canceling it,
Yeah.
and then I'll get my refund plus a voucher for a future cruise. Then you get the full benefit without even having any of these consequences.
I'd be interested to know how the situation develops over spring break, when it's all over slack. That'd be great. 'Cause I
Oh, yeah.
I actually predict they're gonna still go on the cruise.
Yeah, well,
Because you said that they had 2 employees test negative
on that one ship,
on that one ship. Now here's the thing.
but they had 300 people come off another ship
Right.
all positive.
Right. But my point is that most likely in that scenario, they're probably gonna start quarantining.
Yep, so.
They may still go for it, but I do hear rumors about cancellations. Though, so you may be right. Like for ships, and a lot of ships are getting
Yeah.
cancellation, and flights are possibly getting canceled too.
Nope. So yeah, that'll be actually the interesting thing. I'm focusing on the cruise issue, and it ends up being that I can't get to Florida. Cruise goes, but I can't get on the flight. Like the airport's shut down. No, I'm saying not get there.
I feel like a lot of people are going to be canceling on the cruise, so they're most likely going to cancel.
Yeah, see, that was my logic. Is they're not going to sail if it's not going to be profitable for them.
Yeah.
But they're already bribing us with extra money on the cruise if you will keep your reservation. It's like, look, you might die, but we'll give you $200 in onboard credit. Can't use it in the casino though. We'll give you $200 in onboard credit if you decide to risk it.
It's like a game show. It's like a game show now that they're making.
You can't get. That's a good one.
That was good.
Playing the.
That would actually be great if they had that like a little asterisk underneath it explaining why you can't use it in the casino. It's got to be some sort of law because there's all sorts of. This isn't like a new thing with that. Like onboard credits that you get from cruises for some reason just can't be used in the casino. It's not like this onboard credit, any onboard credit. There's got to be some sort of law because like whenever the ships are at port at one of these places, the casino closes down. So there's some sort of specific laws surrounding the casinos on the ship. And we avoid the casinos because there's the only place on the ship you can smoke. So we don't have to go through, and we don't gamble. Well, we gamble big with bingo.
Hardcore, baby. Hardcore.
Because bingo comes with happy hour. Happy hour comes with bingo, maybe. You're looking at that. You're looking at it that way. All right. Well, last thing. Let's start talking about the exam.
What was it that you mentioned? Because I want to look into this more now. Like onboard cruises, you said casinos.
Yeah, there's some special case with the casinos and the shops on cruise lines. It has to do with international waters. So like all the stores that are on cruise ships and the casino all shut down when you're docked at an island. And when you're at sea, all those things open up. So there's something about how international law relates to those things versus, because on the ship you don't pay taxes when you buy something from the store because it's duty free or whatever. You're out in the middle of the ocean. But I assume when you're docked at a country, you fall underneath the laws of that country.
I found something. I think I found something.
All right, so let's talk about midterm now, and then we'll talk about what's happening the rest of this week. And we'll finish up our link list and start talking about shunting yard. So I put up an online midterm. It's due by noon today. That would be hilarious. You have 2 hours to take it. If you haven't started, you're already behind. It's due midnight Friday. I encourage you to get it done before then, but you have between now and midnight on Friday to take the exam. The exam is, you have 2 hours, which should be plenty of time. It's a hour exam. It's designed to be an hour exam. If I were giving it in class, I'd give it as a 1 hour exam. So just set the timer for 2 hours. So 2 hours to take it, 10 questions, about half short answer, half programming. There will obviously be a conversion question. All my exams have at least one conversion question. So make sure you remember how to convert binary to something else or something else to binary or decimal or all those things. So you should know how to do that. So then call it 5 questions will be, tell me about data, linked lists versus arrays, things like that. So short answer things from our slides. Not necessarily memorization things, big picture things we focused on this semester. Pointers, things like that. And then 4 or 5 questions will be programming. Write a method that does this. Create a class that does something else. If I ask you to create a class, it'll probably be a fairly simple class, proving that you know how to kind of create the logic for the logic for a class in C++. So close book, close note, close Google, close neighbor. So I want it to be your own individual work. If you can use a calculator. If you want to use a text editor or something like that to help you format your code, you can. And I'm even relatively okay with you testing your code. But here's the caveat. When I'm grading it, I'm gonna assume that you didn't test your code. So, I'm gonna assume there's probably gonna be some small little syntax errors. I'm missing semicolon here and stuff like that. I'm not taking off for things like that. So my warning to you would be, don't test your code constantly to the point that you run out of time to finish the questions. I might use it like this. If you have an idea in your head, like, I wonder if this will work, write a quick little line of code, test it in the compiler, say, oh yeah, that works the way I thought it would work. Apply it to your solution. I'm not looking for perfect syntax. I'm looking for competence, right? I grade my exams on competence, so it's going to be pretty clear whether you roughly know what you're doing or you definitely don't know what you're doing. Go ahead.
Will you be using C# for that?
I hope not. Because we've been using C++ in here. Yeah. The expectation will be any code you write on the exam will be in C++.
Okay.
That's the expectation.
Follow-up question. How exactly do we format that for the questions? Because, we've been doing it with the HPP and the CPP. Should we be doing the HPP as well?
Well, if you would do the HPP if it was required. So if you're writing a class, if I'm just asking you to write a function, you just have to give me the little chunk of code for it. But if I'm asking you to write a whole class, you should show me you understand the different pieces.
For a main function.
Yep. Yep. And then, you can, if you wanted to, you could post your stuff on GitHub and give me a link if that was how you prefer. Otherwise, you can paste the code directly in there. I think on exams it allow you to upload a file too. So if that's a thing, feel free to do that. Just get your code in there. Again, I'm not going to necessarily run it. I'm going to look at your code for relative competence. Does this code pretty much show that they know what they're doing versus not? So if you have a HPP file and then the C file below it, just kind of label this stuff is part of the HPP, this stuff is part of the CPP. If you have multiple files like that, you're not going to be writing 300 lines of code. I'm asking you to do a fairly simple class. Yeah.
So my question is, so you know how like a lot of our code, like linked lists include nodes and stuff like that,
Mhm.
node CPPs. How many methods could you would you have us do a question where say like establish like a node.cpp?
Like how many different classes might play a role in it?
So like for like one of the questions, would you have let's say you want us to make a linked list, but the linked list requires us to do all these other methods. Would you say like keep with the fact that we've already established the link, like you would tell us the variables that
Yeah, there are several questions on there. I say you can assume the existence of a linked list that already has these methods.
Okay.
Solve the problem with the assumption that that already exists, for example. But for what I would expect you to write yourself, anywhere between 0 extra objects up to, 10,000 extra objects, something like that. That would be the case in Clancy's special exam.
Oh, yeah. So there's like two versions of the exam. One is
The whole exam is in binary. The ultimate conversion question. First, convert your exam. This is Unicode represented binary.
Good luck.
Is in binary.
I don't want to convert it.
No, the other thing is you're expecting Professor Lippman to seriously grade that. He's probably just gonna give Clancy an F on it.
Yeah, I would just put a 0 down to begin with.
Program the cure.
So even if you tried.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, so yeah, you have sometime between. I mean, the exam is actually live right now. I would encourage you not to start it during class, but when you have a 2-hour period of time to be able to sit down and work on the exam nonstop, because you have to do it in a single sitting. You can't come and go as you want to sit down. 2 hours. Take the exam. Remember, I have the policy, if you do better on the final exam than you did on the midterm, I'll replace your midterm exam grade with it. So regardless of what you get on this exam, it can be fixed by the final. But 2 hours, 10 questions, roughly half are going to be programming. Most of those are going to be write a function that does something. So that idea of having multiple pages of stuff, multiple files, is either represented on 0 or 1 questions. I don't remember, but something along those lines. Yeah.
Would this be cumulative from
Well, yeah, because so as much as programming is cumulative, you're going to have to know how to write loops and things like that. But the focus will certainly be on what we've talked about in here with memory-focused stuff and linked lists versus arrays and that kind of stuff. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between pointers and arrays and linked lists and arrays? Because there seems to be, just going over last class's video, like you were saying, a string pointer and a string array are the same thing, and there seem to be like, a list and an array are kind of interchangeable word-wise, but they're not always like the same thing, so.
Yeah, well, the reality is, I'll show some examples. I mean, it's a good question, but they're always interchangeable in theory. So where you're hung up is that C sometimes won't let you pass something as a pointer when it's actually an array or vice versa. So C makes you kind of declare at some level what it is that you're intending to pass so they can give some sort of syntactic structure to it. But at the end of the day, what's under the hood is just a memory address. So let's kind of draw this as a picture. And probably the easiest way to look at this is to consider strings versus character arrays, because we'll say those are our two representations, right? So we have a collection of characters is a character array, but we also know those as this idea of a string is a collection of characters. So let's go ahead and let's just create. Do I have a nice friendly picture I can steal from? This will be good enough. See, so he's going to have homework today since he missed the debate on whether I should go on the cruise or not.
Yep.
Fair punishment.
No, it's fine.
Actually, how many times have you question, a curious question, how many times have you actually missed class when you were in college?
Like as a student?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know. I'm not commonly.
not common.
I didn't keep track. I mean, I'm sure once or twice a semester or something.
Yeah. I was just wondering.
Usually for good reasons. And realistically, probably less often for computer science classes. I probably had to be less sick to miss a psychology class than to miss a computer science class. That's probably not the way it should be, but I was a normal lazy student once upon a time. Now I'm just a normal lazy adult. Well, we're all adults anyways. I'm a normal lazy person now, I guess is the better way of putting
I
it.
don't know if I consider it,
All right, well, compared to how I used to be, I am. All right, so we're going to go ahead and say we have this collection of characters that live somewhere in memory. And I've represented this as these are the indexes. This is bucket 0, bucket 1, bucket 2, bucket 3, bucket 4. But these are just the associated memory addresses where those guys live. And actually, since these are chars, and in C++ chars are byte size, this is memory address 101, 102, 103, 104. So the base address of this character array is at memory address 100. The second character is at 101. The third character is at 102, 103, 104. All right. So we're going to call this guy here generically. We're going to refer to him as a collection of char primitive types. All right. And actually, let's add a little to that. We're going to call this a contiguous collection of char primitive types. All right, so the second we add the word contiguous, we're kind of talking about array type things. All right, so contiguous means that this is memory in a row, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104. That's the differentiating factor between array-like things and linked lists, where linked lists live all over memory so that we can shrink and expand them as we desire. All right, but we're going to reference this thing as being a contiguous collection of char primitive types. Now, somewhere we're going to have a pointer. And pointers, the job of a pointer, we're going to say pointers point to a memory address. For collections, they point to the base address of the collection.
So would that be like the first element?
First element, yep. Let's see if I can get this looking a little bit better. Yeah, so the base address would be the first element of it. So let's just make this slide pretty complete. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. So base address is the location of the first element in a collection. All right, that's what that animal is. And this idea of a base address is something that you're going to hear for the rest of your computer science career. Because that's how computers work. We have base addresses and then we have offsets off that base address. All right, so bucket 2 here is go to base address 100, add to it an offset of 2 times the size of what we're storing. That'll give us the 102. A char is size 1 byte. 2 times 1 byte is 2. 100 plus 2 is 102. So we go to the base address, then we jump to an offset from that base address. That go-to move is used throughout computers. Computer architecture, computer software. It's a computer digital logic-y type thing. Is there a question in the back?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still a little bit hung up on contiguous, but does that just mean that they're right next to each other?
Yep, memory in a row.
Okay.
100, 101, 102, 103, 104.
So an array list would be contiguous.
Let's not talk about array lists since that's something from Java specifically, but anything that is an array is contiguous memory.
Well, a linked list would not be.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's the important differentiation for us in here. So we have this array type things which are relatively fast but relatively memory inefficient. And then we have this linked list thing which are relatively slow and relatively memory efficient. Right now we're talking about collections that are stored in contiguous memory, which would be more like the array type thing. All right, so this is what the thing looks like in actual memory. So then to your question is, what are the different kinds of animals that could hold this, that could point to this? Well, I can have a char pointer. So a char pointer is a variable that holds a memory address that points to one of these, a char. So this guy would point to the memory address of a char. So that's one thing that guy could hold. Similarly, under the hood, I can say string S. This guy is implemented in terms of an array of, in terms of a char pointer, in terms of an array of chars. So just like in Java, we have this class called string. And we don't necessarily get to see Java's implementation of the string class, but we believe that since strings are indexed from 0 to the length minus 1 of the string, they act a lot like arrays, with the caveat that they are always collections of chars, and that we cannot change them directly. We have to build new strings in order to make modifications to them. All right, but any way you cut it, the first character in AR here is an H. The first character in S here is an H. Okay, so both of these guys ultimately get you to the same place in memory. The animal that lives in memory looks the same for both of these guys. The difference is that a string abstracts us away from working directly with the array, and instead gives us, ways of converting the string to uppercase and to lowercase, and it gives us some friendly functions. So I'm going to move this down the list a little bit because I'm going to talk about the closest comparison here. So we can say that we have a char array. In this case, this guy would be a char array of size 5. These two guys here are functional synonyms with each other. So AR in this case will equal a memory address to the base address of the collection of 5 chars. This guy here. Whereas this guy here, AR, equals a memory address, which is the base address of this collection of chars. This does not necessarily tell us that we have 5 there, because somewhere else when we first allocated this, I'll show you, we would have something like malloc 5 times size of char. So we're going to ask for some memory. How much memory? Enough memory for 5 characters. This is going to find us a plot of land somewhere in memory big enough to hold 5 characters. So contiguous memory big enough to hold 5, and it'll return for us the memory address where that guy lives. So AR holds the address of a char. Specifically, it's the base address of a collection of chars. Just as this guy right here, a char array of size 5, these two guys mean the same thing. They ultimately are getting a place in memory big enough to hold 5 chars and coming back with the pointer to the base address. So from a programming perspective, we would say that these two things are identical. Now, in some cases, I think we saw last time that if I'm passing something into a function to manipulate it as a string, I'll have to go back and we'll try to prove this. Actually, let's just go ahead and do it to fully answer this question. We're allowed to do one of these, but not the other, I think was the C++ position on this. So let me quickly, do I have a driver for this? I do. So let's just dump this guy for well, here, I'll just comment this out for a moment. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a char pointer named AR, and this guy is going to be equal to, can I use malloc in here? Does it tell me where malloc lives? Well, we'll find it in a second. And we're going to say this guy is 5 times size of char. And I want to say malloc lives in standard lib. It does live in standard lib. Oh, that's a neat thing you can do in Linux, actually. If you, there's a thing called it's manual page. So this is the manual page for malloc. I think does C maybe use alloc? So malloc returns for us a pointer, and this guy takes in the size and it memory allocates some stuff for us, and it lives inside of standard lib. So we'll see if we can, I just want to compare these two things directly. Oh, we're good here. There we go. All right, so I'm asking to allocate some memory. How much memory? 5 times the size of a char. I happen to know the size of a char is 1, so this will give me 5 bytes of memory. Memory allocate will go and find 5 bytes of memory somewhere out there and give me the base address of that stored in AR. Similarly, if I say char AR2 5, that's going to go and create me a place in memory. These two things do the same thing. So if I go ahead and do cout AR and we'll go ahead and run this.
Your thing is commented out 2 rows is in the VLANs.
I ninja'd? Is that what you're saying? I ninja'd. Oh, yeah, I see. Thank you. All right, and where am I here? Oh, it's not giving me the address version of this. It's actually interesting that cout doesn't give me a cout tries to treat them as strings right off the bat. So if I were to go ahead and say, well, here, I'm just going to cheat real quick. I think there's a way to do this with IOStream, but I just don't know it off the top of my head. It's tio.h. So I'll go ahead and say printf percent p \n ar. And we'll do the same thing for AR2. I'll just comment out these things real quick. So that gets me my 2 memory addresses. So this is old C-style print functions from standard input-output. And this allows me to specifically say that here's a placeholder for a pointer. So that'll show me the address of it. C-out is because these guys are both, actually I think I can do this if I say int AR3 of size 5, and I try to print out AR3. See, we get the memory address. So C out specifically, this guy tries to treat char pointers and effectively a char pointer as strings. So it's trying to process this guy as a string, which is why I got the weird output for AR2. It didn't give me the base address. Instead, it says, oh, you must want me to treat that guy as a string. So it's trying to take this memory that I didn't put any characters into and trying to treat it as a bunch of ASCII characters.
I have a random operating system question.
Mhm.
So, like, let's say, like, hypothetically, your RAM is, like, filled to the brim, like, you're using
Yep.
all of it. If we were to, like, run this program, would it not run, or is there, like, a little bit set aside where the operating system?
You
full?
probably get a segmentation fault because
Okay.
it wouldn't be able to, Malik wouldn't be able to find enough memory
Okay.
to give it to you. Yeah.
I was wondering, for the coding sections of the test,
Mhm.
we need to remember the includes.
If that was the one thing you left off, that'd be fine. Yeah. Again, it's a competency thing. It's pretty clear when I look at code to know whether this person pretty much knows what they're doing or definitely doesn't know what they're doing. Rarely do you have something that's drastically in the middle. I think most exams are kind of like 70% and better for those that are pretty much know what they're doing. Maybe a little bit, a lot of times it's a confidence thing, not a syntax thing. You just aren't fully confident in your problem solving yet. But 70 and better means that you're fine. There's very rarely like a 50 on the exam. It's usually 70 and better and like 15 or worse, where basically you didn't fill out the exam. So it's pretty polarizing. All right, but keep in mind, that's the reason why I have the policy for the 2 exams. A midterm exam, if it were up to me, I wouldn't even give grades. It would just be pass, fail in the end. Did you meet the requirements? Are you good to go to the next class? That's fine, but we live in a society where grades are a thing. Okay, this exam's for you, not me. I don't really care. I get paid either way, right? Okay, my vocation is I want to teach you so you can go out and make $1 zillion doing computer science-y stuff. Whether I gave you an A, B, C, or D isn't going to have a long-term drastic effect on my life. My goal is that you learn the stuff one way or another, however that gets accomplished, in the context of I have to treat all of you the same, right? If I didn't have to treat all of you the same, then I could kind of create kind of special one-off things for certain individuals to help them learn their own way of doing things. So this is kind of the playing, if we think of the world as the Matrix, we got to play by the rules. The university rule says you got these grades, you got to treat all the students the same and things like that. So I tried to do the best within that box while still giving you lots and lots of opportunities to do well in the class. With the ultimate goal of I want you to learn. I don't care what grade you get. But society says the grade should be the good grade, right? It's just the way it is. All right, so let's just look at this real quick. the C out, which would be the kind of, let's call it the newer style of IO. This is IO stream stuff that came with C++. It tries to treat things that are char pointers, like AR2. It tries to say, oh, you must want to output the string. I'm going to be smart, and I'm going to do that for you, rather than treat this like a memory address. Notice that AR3 here, these two guys are basically identical animals, right? They are both arrays of things. This first one happens to be an array of chars. This second one happens to be an array of ints. This will have more contiguous memory because the size of an int is bigger than the size of a char. An int is 4 bytes, a char is 1 byte, so this will be 4 times the size of memory. But both of these guys will hold the base address of this array. And we saw that for AR3, which is our int array, it was perfectly happy giving us that address. Right there. No problem. It's an array, I'll give you the base address of that array. That's what arrays are. But it tried to be fancy for us for a char pointer because it says, oh, you mean a string. Okay, so Sarah, that's the evidence of your original question, is it seems like it wants to treat those as strings, but sometimes it's allowing you to do one thing or another depending on whether you passed it as a char pointer or a string or a char array. So we'll explore that a little bit here. So if I go ahead and in AR3, or AR2 rather, this is actually an interesting question. Is it going to let me set this? I don't think it's going to. I'm going to try to set that to hello, and I think it's not going to let me set it to a literal. Yeah, so this is a base address. I can't modify it, so I can say set the value at AR2 equal to that. See, I can certainly do this. I can say char pointer AR4 is equal to hello. Let me just comment this out now. So I'll go ahead and make this guy AR4. And, well, here, I'll run this real quick. All right, so this is kind of where you were getting at before. So C++ forbids converting a string constant into a char pointer. Why is that? We've discussed that strings are char pointers. But it's saying that this is a special kind of animal. Double quote, hello, double quote is something called a string constant. And because it's a string constant, it'll only allow us to put that into something built for holding strings. Okay, so it's this new kind of animal. Now, if I say, I think I can do this. All right, there's our hello. So this is the example that Sarah was bringing up, I think. Am I working with the kind of stuff, or it's so far out there right now? So let's just keep going with this. So if I say char pointer AR5 is equal to hello, and I'm advertising these guys as being synonyms, right? I'm saying that a char array and a char pointer are the same things. And we saw that they were the same thing there. It treated them the same. It gave us some memory. That memory, I guarantee, held 5 bytes of contiguous memory in a row. No problem. All right, no problem at all. And we would see that if I were to do a printf here on AR4 and 5, so those are our two string literal thingies. Oh, it's giving me the same warning as before. Let me just comment this guy out for right now. He's the one it doesn't like. I'll just leave this at AR or whatever. So the very first memory address will be what's returned by this string literal. So there is the address of that string literal where it lives in memory. That's the base address of the character array that holds the collection of characters HELLO. All right, so if I was in C, this guy would be allowed. C would allow this because C treats string literals as a character array. C++, a newer version of C++, treats string literals as likely something that is part of the syntax for strings, because string through string.h are now part of the language. So it's kind of hijacked the syntax. The thing that begins with a double quote and ends with a double quote is no longer kind of convenience syntax for dealing with char arrays. Now it's convenience syntax for working with strings. All right, so that's why C++ is cool with this, because it's saying, well, this is more modern than this. So saying a char array, AR4, is, and not giving it a size. I think if I gave it a size here, it might scream at me. Because at this point, let's see, string for array of chars is too long. I actually think I can make that 6, and it might work based on what that error message was.
So what is happening when you don't give it a size?
It's allocating the size for me. It's effectively doing this behind the scenes.
And can we do that like anywhere? Like just like how is that? I guess it's just behind the scenes that's different from an array list.
Correct.
Okay. But we can do that like elsewhere. Just do the brackets with nothing in them, and it will just give us the correct size.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, it'll automatically allocate enough memory for the thing on the right because it's treating it like strings. And the thing is, that's not very C++-y for us because we're usually used to working with memory directly. But there are some conveniences. So if you go back to like the week 1 of class or 2 or whatever, I had you write the paper about the original C++ to modern C++, we start seeing some conveniences sneak in that will do some of this stuff for us. So if we go back in here now, we see that I was able, so if I gave this a 5, because this is actually an interesting thing that I think that Noah mentioned to us last time, I get a warning right now. So initializer string for array of chars is too long. So it's saying that this string, hello, is too long to fit into this array. But it's not too long to fit into that array. That array is okay. Okay, so the question is why is an array of 6 required to hold a string with only 5 characters in it? Go ahead. Yeah, so there's a little invisible thing in here, \0. That is the string termination character. And this kind of goes hand in hand with exactly what we're talking about here is when I use this double quote, a bunch of characters, double quote syntax, it is calling this guy, it's labeling it as a string literal. And string literals are terminated with a \0. That's what tells the things that work with strings that as I'm walking through this array of chars, when I finally hit a \0, I'm at the end of the string. All right, and you can actually hack this a little bit. So let me go ahead.
I was going to ask, is that a universal C++ thing, the \0, where it terminates things at that, or is it just for strings?
It's just for strings.
Okay.
Just for strings.
So let's say after hello, or after the H, you typed \0.
Yeah, about that. Like I just said, we're going to hack it. So it's actually kind of an interesting thing. So we're going to say this is okay. I'll go ahead and stop printing out these memory addresses for a moment. We'll go ahead and see out AR4, which should give us our hello, right? So there's our hello. How did I build that string? I built that string by creating an array of 6 characters to hold my 5 characters plus the invisible \0. I'll go ahead and print out hello. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say AR4 at bucket 2 is equal to the character \0. Here's your HE. Okay, so I broke my string, right? I let C++ take my 5 character string here. This is like a constructor for the string. And it said, okay, I'll go ahead and give you some memory, and I'll throw these 5 characters in there. Then I'll tack on the \0 on the end because you've told me this is a string literal. No problem. But then I went in and I artificially changed the value of bucket 2, which is 0, 1, 2, which used to be this L. I made this L a \0, like this. Actually, this would be an interesting thing. Will it let me use \0 in that? It will. So, hee hee.
So wait.
Oh, hold on. Let's go ahead.
When cout is like writing stuff to the screen, it looks at individual characters and prints that. Like it doesn't do it all at once. It looks at the first character.
You mean under the hood?
Yeah.
Yeah, cout is saying, I'm smart. I see that this guy is a pointer to a char. I'm going to walk through it as if you want me to deal with strings here, not as if you want me to give you the memory address. So whoever implemented cout for char pointers is going to say, I'm not going to give you the value of that char pointer, which is the memory address. Instead, I think you probably want me to give you the string that I found there. And it's going to walk through it until it hits a \0. Go ahead. All right, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So with the \0, you said there's always an invisible 0 at the end of a string. But like a slash string, you know what I mean? But like,
Well, yeah.
what
So
happens? You would, yeah, I was gonna say, what would happen with the size change? You would put it at the end of place that was asking.
it does not.
It's not.
Yeah.
So basically, when you're compiling it, slash when you're running it, it's when it doesn't see that there, or when we don't put it there, it's assumed that it's invisible, basically.
Correct.
Reach the end of the string. Okay.
Yep. But I mean, I would say generally speaking, you will rarely directly interface with \0s. We just kind of saw that there's like a trick where we proved to ourselves that it is there, and that is how cout uses, figures out where the end of the string is, because we don't, we can't ask arrays necessarily to tell us their length. So cout figured out that, oh, here's the base address. I'm just going to start printing out characters till I hit a \0. So we saw that we could hack it, right, and make it work. But yeah, go ahead.
How come we only need to allocate one more byte of memory for 2 chars?
One more byte of memory for 2 chars. What do you mean?
Oh, sorry. Like
The back.
like the
Slash and
so for
zero.
hello it's 5, but /0, which is 2 more chars, is only.
It's not 2 more chars. A /0 / is the escape character.
Okay.
0 is the value. So we want to treat this as a special symbol, a special character in the language, which is the string termination character.
Is / fine in the string as long as 0 doesn't follow it, or is there other things that could follow it?
Oh yeah, I mean \n. We've seen that a bunch of times.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and if I want an actual / in here, I'd have to say \\.
Okay.
All right, so does that make some sense? So cout treats anything that's a char pointer as a string, as well as strings. So if I print out, this guy here, I can now go ahead and load that with characters. So I can say, if you want to stay super old school with this, we could say AR plus, we could say AR is equal to an H. E L L O, and this is AR plus 1, AR plus 2, AR plus 3, AR plus 4. So I've loaded hello into that char pointer now. I directly allocated memory to give myself a base address for enough things here. Actually, this will be pretty interesting. I have not put a \0 in here. So then I'm going to come down here and we're going to go ahead and we'll output AR. Oh, that's my, I need to turn that back to 6 for that guy. No, I just had changed it when I was doing one of the examples. All right, so we actually lucked out there, but we got it right for the wrong reason. So I did not actually load a \0 into this guy. Really, I needed, if I wanted to do this right, I would have had to ask for 6 buckets and then put at bucket 5 AR plus 5 equal to \0. That would be doing this right. I've actually loaded a string literal into that place in memory, terminating with the \0. Now, when I had this guy set without the \0 in here and a 5, it did work. But let me show you something here. Cout size of AR. Just run it real quick and I'll tell you what it's doing. That's actually super interesting. Why did it give me a size of 8 for AR? Is this 5 times size of char, so that should be 5.
Are you getting like the size of the pointer? Is that why it's giving you?
Yeah, that would be 32 bits. So if I do size of star AR, will that give me the size of the string? That gives me, no, that gives me the size of the character that lives at bucket 0, which is a 1. Yeah, so I actually can't get the number of characters in that string. That's very interesting, though. How did cout know when to end? I bet you cout is using a, there's an array size function that I think would give me the 5 for this. Size of doesn't seem to do it. Because if I say size of AR, which is a pointer, as you said, it's giving me the size of the memory address that's there. It's a 32-bit memory address, or 8 bytes. 8 times 4 is 32. Where I'm really looking for this 5, how much memory lives at AR. And because I didn't put the string termination character in there, I won, somehow cout had to figure out what was the last character.
Wait, is that's a pointer, right?
Which one?
That array is a pointer, right?
AR?
Yeah.
I have several arrays here. Which one are you talking about?
Like the one that you're print, the cout size of, it's a point. That's a pointer. Right?
Well, AR is a pointer. Star AR is the value that lives at that. So that would be the H.
Yeah, because I was just looking this up for like for your question being the size of an array. It apparently doesn't work with pointers.
Well, because we're working directly with pointers, so this kind of goes back to Sarah's original question.
Right.
If I said, give me the size of AR2, I suspect this will give me a 5. Or at least it might give me a 5. Depends if it treats that guy as a string or a, yeah, so that gives me the 5. If I had done that for an int array, I think it would have given me the size of the memory that was there. All right, so C treats things that were built as straight pointers versus straight arrays differently. It kind of has the default behavior being different. But under the hood, they are both pointers to a place in memory. And we can kind of prove that at the printf level where we get to specify how we want it to treat it. So in C makes less assumptions, and we just say, look, I'm giving you a placeholder for a pointer. Print it. Print that guy. And the placeholder for a string is %s. Where a string back then was the concept of a string, which was a character array processed at one character at a time until you hit the \0. All right, make some sense? All right, so any way you cut it, this is a bunch of memory with stuff at that memory, with the stuff in this case being chars. This is a bunch of available memory that we've requested, but we haven't actually put anything there. This is a bunch of memory that we've requested and we put something there. Keep in mind, you could always do something like this. You could do AR4 size 1,000, and you can say AR4 is equal to well, it won't let me break it into 2 lines. I'd still have to load it 1 character at a time. Well, if I say this is equal to hello, now AR4 has 1,000 bytes of memory as requested. But it's only using the first 5 bytes of it. Well, really the first 6 bytes. Because byte number 6 is going to have a \0, terminating the string. So we have this giant container for holding our string, and we're only using the very first part of it. But the \0 will tell things like cout where to stop. That make sense? We actually might be able to hack this a little bit to drive the point home. If I say AR4 at bucket 5 is equal to, here, I'll just force a question mark in there. Effectively, I've overwritten my \0. And now I try to print out AR4. This guy up here. It's going to go through HELLO, then hit a question mark, never hitting the \0. And I suspect it's going to keep going the rest of the 1,000 buckets. So I probably can do something like AR4 at bucket 20 is equal to an M or something like that. So proving that we're going to go farther into that string, we don't stop. I did not get an M there. Interesting. So it's treating string termination as first place that either has default value in memory or a \0. So we're seeing new style C++ here where it's saying string termination can either be a \0 or this was the default value for memory, this very next bucket. If you haven't filled it, we'll treat that as string termination. Because I never got to my M, even though we definitely put it there. Make sense? Because if I were to print out AR at bucket M, or AR at bucket 20, I would get, was it AR4? I should get my M. There's my M. It's there. It just cout didn't get to it because it terminated the first time it hit empty space. All right, that makes some sense. That clarifies some things with these guys. They're all the same thing. How C++ deals with them by default might change. But every single one of them is a character pointer. All right, I'll put this code up so you have something to reference and play with. I won't re-push it to GitHub. I'll put it up on Slack since this had nothing to do with our current linked list implementation. Remember, the exam is due by midnight on Friday. We will have class on Thursday where we'll keep working on our linked list of strings and our shunting yard thing. There's no homework for Thursday other than schedule the time to take your exam, and I won't give you homework over break. Sarah had a question?
Yeah. Can you still put up some things like giving us an idea of what's on the exam, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, what I'll do is I'll sit here and talk to myself for a few minutes just flipping through the slides.
Okay.
And it'll be at the end of the video. How about that?
I actually have a couple of questions about
All right, definitely know about pointers. So this slide. Definitely know about type in terms of the size of things.
I was gonna talk to you about missing the test on Thursday, because I'm not gonna be here, but it's online.
Yep, so you're good.
Yeah.
Understand linked lists in terms of the, head and possibly tail and next pointer and those kind of things. This is what nodes might look like. So if I showed you a picture of this, or I asked you to kind of give me a diagram, you should be able to do that. Probably won't ask you about compiling stuff. That's not pertinent to what we're trying to do. I won't ask anything specific about sorting. That was more of just practicing with C++. Understand the difference between a singly and a doubly linked list. Doubly linked list having a tail, allowing you to go to previous nodes. Know what a stack is in terms of its functions, push, pop, and optionally peek. What each of those do. We haven't really talked about queues yet, so I won't ask any questions specifically about queues, but they're just another version of linked lists. Yeah, I think that. So I would say focus on C++ specific things, but mostly dealing with pointers, memory, that kind of stuff. I won't ask you to use malloc. That's something we just did in our example there, but you should be able to create arrays of certain sizes. You should be able to work with strings. You should be able to do things with arrays given the size of the array. Just normal C++ logic things. Yes, that's probably the best I can give you, I guess. So let's call it that.